Greetings, friends. This is a video from the channel Trey the Explainer, dated February 12th, 2017. So I know it's not the most recent video. This video is called Almost Every Single Transitional Fossil Discovered. It's 122,000 views, almost 8,000 likes, less than 200 dislikes. Though I am a critic of some of the aspects of evolutionary theory, I always like to see what the arguments are, what the latest stuff is. But it's very short, very brief video.
You know, Darwin said his whole theory depended on the fossil remains. And he said we should be able to line up from a single cell organism to man, several miles long, and just walk right down the fossil trail and see how everything evolved. And he said the only reason they didn't have the fossils is because they were not geologically sophisticated enough, but that we would be in 50 to 100 years. Well, that was 150 years ago. We still haven't found them.
This clip of Ben Carson, the former neurosurgeon and 2016 presidential candidate for the Republicans, was not included by me. This is put in the beginning by Trey the Explainer. So he's setting up the goof, the dumb guy, Ben Carson. I mean, he is only a neurosurgeon, so any scientist who's accomplished, who questions evolution, the way it's presented at least, is a threat to the evolutionists, specifically to the Darwinists, because they worship on the grail of science and empiricism. Nothing wrong with empiricism and science. We like all of that stuff. But in the ancient world, that was just one pillar of truth. Life is not reducible to science, and truth is not reducible only to science. He's putting what I thought was a very clearly elucidated point by Carson with a problem with evolutionary theory. There's many problems, but obviously if you're championing empiricism, then we want the best empirical evidence, the best in-your-face physical objects laid out. So here's the evidence. I decided to cut out the music that he includes since it sounded like an old famous song. Well, I don't know what the copyright situation is. And it goes ba 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 ba. You know, maybe you've heard that tune. This is evidence? This is just a bunch of random photos at incredible speed. Are you going to explain these photos? Are you going to use them in some constructive way, some argument? Oh, here's a bunch of data. You know, data is infinite. Is there any sense to this data? There doesn't seem to be, it's just a collection of illustrations. And I'm not, of course these animals existed, but I mean, how does this even stick to the question? We want to know the transition between species. So as we'll see, he has a few diagrams that do depict basic transitions in what we would call microevolution within species, like from a small horse to a big horse. I think he has something along those lines. But again, that's a diagram. We would like to see it in, let's say in a museum. Lay out the skeletons in a line. I don't think that's asking too much, because we want to see the real fossils. Just lay them out in a line. You have a person standing next to it. You take a photo. You take a short video as you're walking along the line of the fossils, so people can gauge the size. They can see that it's real, because there has to be obviously some good faith on both sides. We have to assume that we're not the intellectual climate hasn't fallen so low now that we can't even trust people to make fakes or to computer generate stuff or to do dirty tactics like that. I have to assume that there's going to be a minimum level of good faith on both sides, and then we will give you, rightfully so, that there could be more to evolution than creationists have supposed. There could be, but you have to show the actual transition, you see, and that's not what's happening by showing them so quickly. It's kind of like there's a little smugness to this video. And yeah, it's the common problem. Microevolution, there's macroevolution. I mean, especially show us the appendages growing on. Now, I understand that the fish which crawls around in the mud and then it kind of has legs. It's like, yeah, you can find that sort of stuff in muddy parts of the world today. It's like, yeah, fish that are living in tidal zones. It's very muddy and mucky, and it's like they kind of get around on their fins. It's like, yep, you've got a fish with stubs. And but we really need to see something a bit more substantial than that, like an antelope with just some other appendage that coming out of it. That appendage would not serve any direct function at all. It would actually hinder the creature. It would be more likely to die, be less likely to pass on its genes, because it would be viewed rightfully as a freak by the other members of the herd or the group. Only in rare situations is that going to help. Yes, of course, bacteria can morph into something else, and over time there is development within a certain bound. No one is denying that. There's so much misinformation and straw men out there, because, one of the common things that hardcore Darwinists present in their effort to refute what they see as the argument of creationism is that they put forward what amounts to be microevolution. Like I already discussed what that is. Just like it's like dogs. It's like the microevolution would be like taking the dog and making all the breeds of dogs we have today from the wolf. It's essentially the same thing. Horses, and you have the zebra, you have all sorts of different horses around the world. But it's still a basic model. You have not gone beyond that model into another type of even a different family of mammals. You haven't even crossed that. Now supposedly he's showing some picture with this canine cat sort of thing. I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, you could see how a canine and a feline are more similar than something we think of as a rodent or a rat. That's a bit different from thinking of like a cat or a dog. But even then, I'm a little skeptical because the picture he's showing looks more like a cat or feline creature than it does like a dog. A lot of this depends on how the artists are depicting it. The depictions of the early pre-humans. You really got to wonder what is the agenda here, because the way they're depicting them, it's almost like they want you to see that man has this pathetic origin. It's just so disgusting, and there's nothing glorious about it. There's nothing sacred about it. We are nothing more than base matter being used by our genes. It's a completely soulless cycle. It offers no reason to live. I don't mean to fall into the empiricist trap here. I'm just looking for the empirical evidence because that's what they said they were going to provide. Don't fall into this thinking that everything is understood empirically, like the basis of truth is only empiricism. That is a huge fallacy. You never want to get into that, because that omits mathematics, forms, Not necessarily, I'm not talking about necessarily Plato, but like 2 + 2 = 4. That stuff doesn't evolve. That stuff is beyond time and space. That stuff is in the realm of God. These images that he's flashing by us, I mean, the whole focus of the video is wrong, is the point. So I don't really need to debate each and every fossil. I don't even have any real problem with any of these. I mean, all of these things could very well have existed and been real. I mean, it's the transition again. That's what we're actually looking to see. And when half the stuff is illustrations or very poor remaining fossil collections, they're isolated. So only a few of these examples actually have them together. Haikuela, the first fish to bear a skull. Oh, we have a very unclear image here, and it's like, oh, okay. There's weird creatures in the world today. I mean, would you be surprised if something like this was found at the bottom of the ocean? I mean, who knows? I mean, here he is showing us something called Mirma, a transition between wasps and ants, and I guess it's something caught in amber. And okay, so it looks like something like a wasp or an ant, which we have today. We have that. There's anyone who looks at ants can see that. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, like they have a similar body structure to wasps. Anyone's going to see that if they actually look at these things today. And even if you look at a bee, it's similar. It's in the same family. So it's like, yeah, transition between wasps and ants. For us to admit that, it's supposedly for them it is proving their version of this extreme evolution, like everything actually came from one or only several like single-celled ancestors, and it's all that, it's extremely connected. When we're being shown things which are fairly closely connected. Cooksonia, the earliest vascular plants. Okay, some sticks in a stone. Okay. Eoplectures, oldest haplogyne spider. Okay, an ancient spider. Wow, that's great. That's wonderful. Okay, now here we have something like that moves in the direction of being an actual transition, now, albeit an artistic diagram. We have here at the top Dimetrodon, below that Thrinaxodon, below that Probanognathus. And again, this is not at all satisfying, but at least they have the concept of what a transition is. So then why didn't you focus on showing only this kind of stuff and doing better examples of it? But no, instead he's showing a bunch of other isolated images, which are just like drawn out of the chaotic mass of empirical recorded findings. Drawn out of that chaos. Well, here we have something attempting to make order. Great, that's great, because God is all about order. Creation with a creator is all about order, so that's great. Probanognathus, and then we've got it connected with the platypus here, Monotremes, Yanoconodon. Well, okay, but the problem is, even when you look at Dimetrodon at the top, he has that huge, whatever you call it, thing on his back. Didn't they say that's to, attract heat so he can warm up? We already have a huge gap between that and Thrinaxodon. Like, that thing doesn't look at all. I mean, it looks like, kind of you could see a similarity with the legs and the overall dimensions of the body, but the face is different of Thrinaxodon. Significantly, it looks like it has more of a streamlined snout. Whereas the Dimetrodon, it's like, okay, it's a lizard. They're depicting like two different, like this whole mammal reptile thing, which I'm not convinced of at all. The fact of the platypus now having this beak on its face. So then we need to see the beak forming in some creature that you're trying to connect it with. We really need to see the beginnings of that beak and not just a fully formed beak. It's like the animal doesn't have to lose out, when in reality it would lose out developing a new appendage. It would lose out for some time before the organ is perfected. Like with an eye. The eyeball is incredibly complex, like a computer. To suddenly acquire a fully functioning eye would be impossible. The way they're formatting the evolution is everything is moving towards what makes sense at the time to pass on your genes. But then that wouldn't make sense at the time to be slowly developing an eye or any of these other organs, like a platypus bill. Like that would start to affect its face. It would be painful. Maybe it would catch diseases. It would be raw. I mean, obviously this is not supposed to happen. And also, the substantial essential difference between a mammal and a reptile and a fish. To get the, it's like an antelope goes into the sea and it starts getting scales and starts sprouting gills and its blood changes, its brain changes. It's like it becomes an essentially like completely different organism by virtue of its environment. And I just don't think there's actually any evidence, real evidence, presented for that. Here they're showing Homo sapiens as this satanic, demonic, just really creepy look. And this is our ancestors. It's betraying their own dark view of mankind. It is a dark view. Wait until you see the comments here. People are just lapping it up. People are just eating this stuff up. Look at this one here by Psychic Hyrax. The creationists say evolution is fake. The evolutionists say, no, it's not. The creationists respond, show me the proof then. The evolutionists shows lots of proof. Creationists, well, I'm still right because I say so. Evolutionists facepalm, right. Happens every time. That's all that happens because we say so. Right. It's like a stupid straw man. Like no one. Let's say I claimed that, oh my goodness, I don't want to make it too far out, but something absurd enough that enough people will relate to me. If I said that the Earth is really a cube, it's actually a cube, and I proceeded to bring a series of instruments with me, like right-angled instruments and a ruler and a glass, kind of like a magnifying glass, and like a protractor, and I had some boards of, like I was sort of measuring the sun from different angles, and using a compass or whatever, I'm using some basic instruments and I'm presenting this to people and I'm saying, you see the angle the shadow makes in the sun when it's against this right-angled ruler. People are like, well, yeah, it's making that right-angled thing because you're using a right-angled tool and it's forming the shadow. And you're like, no. Well, exactly, that's true, but that would not happen if the Earth was not square because, as you can see, I'm showing you the evidence. Not only this, but look at what the compass is doing. See, you notice the compass is spinning here? Because I put it in a place on the square close to the corners. We're actually close to the corner of the square right now, and the compass is spinning. So this is proof that, again, the Earth has right angles on it. It's a cube. Large, mostly a cube. There might be some little, variations in between. Okay, we haven't worked out fully the details. Is it a perfect cube? How much of a perfect cube it is? What about most streets? Most streets are built at right angles. Do you think that's a coincidence? And most cities, when you look down on it on Google Maps or from an airplane, they look like grid patterns. They look like, a bunch of squares. That's not a coincidence. Because you want to keep those angles if you're on a flat side of a cube. It's better for transportation. It's better for the natural flow of wind. People don't necessarily do it consciously. It just happens. Cities tend to build on these grid patterns because that has to do with the cube-like shape of the Earth. So I've already showed you 3 undeniable pieces of empirical evidence. This is all connected and perfectly explained by Earth as cube. It's technically true. I have used this theory to explain physical aspects of reality. Does this therefore mean that what I have said is true? As in there is a real objective truth out there, superior to any of my physical observations? I think most of you would say, yes, there is something which is true out there. It's not what I'm presenting. That is false. The Earth is not a cube. People still argue as to what it is, but let's just say it's not a cube. But I proved to you that it's a cube. Or I said that I proved it. I presented things. So obviously this is just a silly game of language. I'm not proving anything. This is acting in bad faith. Here's a guy, Potato. When creationists say there is no transitional fossils, they are lying. Most animals are transitional. Well, yeah, I mean, that would fit with your theory. Yeah, everything is in this constant state of movement. And who denies that everything is changing? I mean, again, are creationists saying that things are not changing? No. That's kind of a straw man. You're confusing things that are changing with being in this transition period to another totally different being, even if it's the same species family. It's like something's markedly different enough that everything has been interrupted. And it presupposes, or it assumes, that there's no natural order. There's a chaotic nature because everything's just, it's just going with the flow, whatever. There's no higher order in the universe, keeping things what they are, preserving them as they are. Something with the divine which keeps things in their form, keeps things as they are. And it becomes more meaningless to talk of time because this is like timeless forms. They do exist in time and they fall out of time, but that pattern, that idea is always there. And it had an author, it had a creator, just as code must have a writer. Look at this comment here by Despicable GRU. One of your best videos ever. I'm going to show it to my geological teacher. He will love this. I think he meant to say geology teacher. Well, yeah, man. I'm sure your geological teacher will love this. Of course he'll love this. He's not making a formal argument, but this again is an appeal to authority. There is the bandwagon fallacy, where you say, well, that's what most people are saying. Therefore, it is true. I can say that. I can assert that because there's experts out there. There's a priestly class. They're not priests. We wouldn't admit that, but that's what they are. Your fancy lab coats, white, shining, almost heavenly snow white. How would you guys like to become a fossil? All that weighty sandstone closing up over top of you like a big 500,000 ton blanket, sealing you in sleepily for all eternity. Your soul caught there in the stone. Look at this comment here. Hoops and Dino Man. Is it too much to hope that for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years from now, evolution will finally be accepted as fact worldwide? I mean, it took forever to convince these same kinds of people that the Earth isn't flat and that the stars don't revolve around us. But scientists still convince them eventually, right? Am I being too optimistic here? Well, man, I think you actually are being too optimistic because most people aren't going to buy into your stupid jargon unless you destroy humanity completely, unless you ruin we're already in some bad times. And I don't mean to encourage them, but I think you guys are going to burn yourselves out and you're going to come back to God. If not you, your generation will die off. Most of you atheists won't have kids. Something will take it. I'm not saying, I don't know. I hope Christianity will replace it, but if not that, then it'll just be something pagan and there'll just be some divine system again. So the atheists lose either way. It could be Islam or whatever, they're going to lose. It's funny because a lot of atheists, they started criticizing Islam so much, like Sam Harris, of course, back in the day, criticizing Islam. But, well, you guys are one of the reasons that we're losing to Islam, because you destroyed religion. Thanks a lot. I don't reduce the world to solely physical standards. I think there's a spiritual difference between cats and dogs in the sense of like some essence they have, which is different. And of course, Darwinists would not have time for any of this stuff because they're basically materialists. The animal is the manifestation. This is sounding almost really new age, and I don't mean to do that, but it's like the manifestation of a frequency. It's a feeling, it's a model, it's a thought, it's an idea. So here he shows one of the rare actual fossil transitions in this whole video. He shows from Mesohippus in the late Eocene to Merychippus or Merychippus in the middle Miocene to Equus recently. Equus, of course, is the horse or the ancestor of the horse. That's where we get the word equestrian. But do you see the problem here is this is just, they're all horses. They're all just, they're just tiny horses out there. So you see the little tiny little cute little horse there. They're all horse model. And oh, look, the one on the top has more of a bone over where its nostril area is. It's a longer bone, but I mean the shape of the skull is very similar. I mean, sure, it's a bit different in the older one, but it's the same general pattern down to the bone over the nostril. You haven't even really escaped the horse model with this. You know, there has to be some reasonable bounds here where it's like, okay, you've showed us enough progression in between, because I understand that you could accuse people like me of saying, well, you know, you're just going to ask for endless instances of transitions. I understand it's an infinite spectrum. I understand. But I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to see, we need to see the basic changes in motion. So you need to do better than what you've done here, is all I'm saying. And then he shows Carson again at the end, who's obviously spoken to scientists who are willing to admit these problems, but there seems to be a disconnect in communication. It's like, oh, no, actually, no real scientists actually admit that we still haven't found the transitional species. It's like, no, we definitely have found them. So whoever Carson was talking to, they must have been stupid idiots, not even associated with researching evolutionary science. It's kind of funny. It's like he sets him up like, you see, and then all his followers are going to laugh at Carson and say, ha ha. It's like, but if you've actually been following or looking at what's going on, it's like, whoa, like, are you sure Carson God showed up? Because it looks kind of the other way around to me, buddy. Hasta luego, amigos.